The airplane cabin was quiet, filled with the soft hum of engines and the occasional rustling of bags. Passengers were settling in for the long flight, some already placing earbuds in their ears, others flipping through magazines or scrolling on their phones. The lights had dimmed just slightly, giving everything a calm and sleepy feeling, but not everyone was calm. In one of the middle rows, a woman sat holding her young child. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, her face pale. She wore a hoodie and jeans, nothing fancy, and her hair was pulled back in a messy way, like she hadn't had time to take care of herself. Her child, maybe 3 years old, was fussy and restless, climbing on her lap and trying to look out the window, asking questions that only made her stress worse. She whispered to the child, trying to calm them. She bounced the toddler gently, even though her own hands were shaking. She pulled out snacks from her bag, a small juice box, a broken toy, trying anything to keep her child quiet and occupied. But anyone who looked closely could see that she wasn't just tired, she was on the edge of breaking down. She tried to hide it, looking away from the aisle, but her eyes filled with tears. A few slipped down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away with her sleeve, pretending nothing was wrong. But it was no use, she was crying. Silently, without making a sound. Her shoulders trembled just a little. Most of the other passengers didn't notice. Some were busy with their movies, headphones on. Some glanced at her, saw the tears, and quickly looked away. No one wanted to get involved. 1 or 2 people whispered quietly to each other, but no one stood up. No one asked if she was okay. She was invisible to most of the world, just another tired mother on a plane. But to her, this was not just a hard moment. This was rock bottom. Her life had been falling apart for months. She had lost her job recently. The child's father had left a year ago. She was behind on rent. Her phone had been shut off for days because she couldn't pay the bill. She had no one left in the city she lived in. Now she was flying to a new place, a new state, hoping to start over with a distant cousin who had offered her a couch and nothing more. She had sold most of her belongings just to buy this ticket. Everything she owned now was in the small bag at her feet. The child didn't understand. They were too young. They just wanted their cartoons, their snacks, their hugs. But their mother had very little left to give. She was giving all she had already. She had smiled for her child at the airport, read the same book 10 times, sung lullabies in the bathroom to keep from crying in public. But now, here in the sky, in a small seat next to strangers, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She was falling apart. The woman covered her mouth with her hand and looked out the window, hoping no one would see. Her eyes stared into the night sky, the stars barely visible above the clouds. A small sob escaped her throat. She turned slightly, trying to shield herself from view. But her quiet pain still filled the space around her, like a soft echo only sensitive hearts could hear. A flight attendant walked past but didn't stop. She had seen crying passengers before, and maybe she thought the woman just needed time. Maybe she didn't notice. Maybe she did, and didn't know what to say, and so the woman stayed alone in her sadness. The plane continued to fly, the engines humming, the cabin dim. And the woman cried softly, wiping tears before her child could see. She tried to stay strong for that little one, but inside, she felt like glass already cracked and ready to shatter. In that moment, with 1,000 feet of sky under her and no real place to call home, she wasn't just a passenger, she was a soul looking for help. For a break, for a sign that she was not forgotten. She didn't expect a miracle. She didn't even expect kindness. All she hoped for was to make it through the flight without falling apart completely. But sometimes, in the quiet moments of sadness, someone notices. Someone sees what others don't, and though she didn't know it yet, someone on that plane had seen her tears. Someone not far from her seat had noticed the shaking hands, the forced smile, the eyes too tired to pretend anymore. And that someone was Keanu Reeves. But for now, she sat with her pain, trying not to disturb anyone, trying to keep her child happy, trying to breathe. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know that before this flight was over, her tears would be seen, her pain would be acknowledged, and something truly human would happen in the skies above. And none of the passengers would forget what they witnessed next. Before she could say anything, he walked past her like she wasn't even there. He didn't look at her, didn't smile, didn't stop. The moment was over before it even began. She had been thinking for the last 10 minutes, building up courage to speak to him, not because he was famous, but because he had a kind face. She thought maybe, just maybe, he'd understand. But when she opened her mouth, he had already walked away. The woman looked down quickly, pretending to fix her child's blanket. Her face burned with embarrassment. She hadn't even said a full word, just a soft "excuse me," and that was it. The rejection felt like a slap, even though he hadn't said anything cruel. Maybe that made it worse. She wasn't important enough to be noticed. Not even by someone kind. The child tugged her sleeve, asking for juice again. She nodded and handed over the box, her hand trembling. She felt like crying again, but she bit her lip. She couldn't afford to fall apart a second time. The man who walked past her, he didn't mean to hurt her feelings. He wasn't being rude. He simply didn't know. He didn't know she was about to ask something. Didn't know she had looked at him with a silent cry for help. He had his headphones in, his cap pulled low. He was minding his own business like most people do, but still, it hurt. She had noticed him the moment he sat down a few rows ahead. He was calm, quiet, polite to the flight attendants. Something about the way he moved, so peaceful, so kind, gave her hope. She didn't care about his fame. In fact, she wasn't even sure it was really him at first. She thought maybe it was someone who just looked like Keanu Reeves, but when a nearby passenger whispered his name and showed a quick photo on their phone, she knew it was real. Keanu Reeves, a big Hollywood star. A man known not just for movies, but for being a good person, the kind who takes the subway, the kind who helps strangers, the kind people say is different from the rest. She didn't want money or attention. She didn't want a photo or autograph. She wanted something simple, maybe a smile, a kind word, someone to remind her that life hadn't forgotten her completely, but she'd missed her chance. Or maybe she'd never had one. She turned her face away and pressed her cheek to her child's head, breathing slowly. The little one had finally settled, sipping juice and watching cartoons on a small screen. The woman closed her eyes and tried not to think about the moment that had just passed. She had spoken too softly. She should have tried harder. Or maybe not at all. A few passengers around her had noticed her attempt and how it failed. One woman in the row ahead gave a little glance back, the kind that says, "Poor thing," but didn't say anything out loud. The flight was still going. The minutes were crawling. And the weight in the mother's chest just got heavier. She felt foolish. Who was she to talk to someone like him anyway? He was rich, famous, he had everything. She had nothing but a backpack, a restless child, and tears she couldn't stop. She had told herself not to speak up. But she had. And she'd been ignored. She didn't blame him. She really didn't. It just confirmed what she already felt, that she was invisible in this world. She thought of the last few weeks, the eviction notice, the nights spent in a shelter, the moments she sat on a bench outside a cafe, pretending she was waiting for someone just so her child wouldn't know they had nowhere to go. The kindness of a stranger who gave her a sandwich once. The cousin who sent a bus fare once and then stopped replying. And now here she was, flying to another place, not even knowing if things would be better. Her child reached up and touched her cheek gently. "Mommy, are you okay?" She forced a smile. "I'm okay, baby, just tired." But even the child could see she wasn't okay. Somewhere ahead in the plane, Keanu was leaning back in his seat, unaware of what had just happened. He was reviewing a script or listening to soft music, lost in his own quiet world. He hadn't seen the look in her eyes. He hadn't heard the broken voice starting to speak. Not yet. The woman took a deep breath and wiped her tears again. She told herself it was fine. She'd made it this far without help. She would survive this too. All she had to do was land safely, find the cousin, start fresh. Somehow the flight went on. But something had shifted. Even though he hadn't meant to ignore her, something about the moment hung in the air, unseen, like a thread between two people. That hadn't fully formed, but hadn't been broken either. She didn't know it yet. But the story wasn't over. That soft whisper she tried to speak would soon be answered. The flight continued quietly, but the mother's heart was not calm. Even though she sat still, her thoughts were spinning. The soft lights in the cabin, the sound of engines, and the hum of people chatting all around her felt far away. She had missed her chance to speak. She had hoped someone might notice her pain, but no one did. Or so she thought. The child had finally drifted off to sleep in her lap. The little head rested gently on her shoulder, small fingers still holding the empty juice box. The mother didn't move. She was afraid that if she moved, the child would wake up, and she needed these few minutes of peace more than anything. She looked down at her child and sighed. Her lips pressed tightly together as she tried to stay strong. Her eyes were tired, red from crying. Her back hurt from sitting too long, and her legs were stiff. But none of that mattered. She would take every bit of pain in silence if it meant her child could rest. Then, something happened. Keanu Reeves looked back. It wasn't loud or dramatic. He didn't stand up suddenly or make a big show. He simply turned his head. Maybe he felt something. Maybe he caught a glimpse of the woman out of the corner of his eye. Maybe he just noticed the strange silence in her row, where a mother sat like a statue, hugging her sleeping child and blinking back more tears. He looked at her for a second. Just a second. But something in his face changed. He removed one earbud slowly. He turned his body just a bit toward the aisle. It was almost like a gentle alertness had entered his eyes. A soft focus. A question without words. The woman didn't notice at first. She was looking down, lost in thought. But then she felt a presence. That feeling you get when someone's eyes are on you, not in a bad way, but like someone actually sees you for real. She looked up. Their eyes met. It was quiet. No one else noticed. No one else paid attention. But in that moment, something passed between them, like a message with no sound. Keanu gave a small nod. It wasn't dramatic, just enough to say, "I see you. I understand." The woman blinked. She didn't know what to say. Should she smile? Should she cry? She felt frozen, but his eyes weren't full of pity. They were calm, soft, steady. She felt like she could breathe for the first time in hours. Then, quietly, he reached over to the seat in front of him and spoke to a flight attendant. She leaned down to hear him. He said something with a calm, low voice. The flight attendant nodded and disappeared down the aisle. The woman didn't know what he said. She didn't ask. She didn't even expect anything. She just sat there, holding her child, watching this man who didn't treat her like she was invisible. A few minutes later, the flight attendant returned. In her hands, she had a soft blanket and a small bag with snacks, tissues, and a tiny toy. She leaned over gently and whispered, "This is for you." The mother looked confused. "For me?" The flight attendant smiled. "Someone asked me to give this to you." She looked around, and that's when she saw him again. Keanu was now leaning back in his seat, eyes closed, pretending like nothing happened. He didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't even look at her again. He had given quietly, without expecting thanks or attention. The mother held the blanket in her hand. It felt warm, like a hug she hadn't had in years. The tissues were exactly what she needed. The toy made her child smile when they woke up, and the snack gave her enough energy to eat something after skipping meals for days. But more than all of that, it was the way it was done. Quiet, gentle, respectful. He didn't act like a hero. He didn't want a camera or a round of applause. He just wanted her to feel seen, cared for, human. For the first time on this trip, she felt safe. Not completely, but enough. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were different. These were tears of softness, relief, gratitude. She pressed her lips together and looked down at her child. The little one had woken up and was now playing quietly with the toy. The mother wiped her eyes and whispered to herself, "Thank you, whoever you are." Deep down she knew it was him. And that changed something inside her. She didn't feel invisible anymore. Sometimes, the kindest acts are the quiet ones. Ones that don't need an audience. The ones that happen when no one's watching, except the person who truly needs it. Keanu Reeves didn't do much. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't walk over and make a big speech. He simply paid attention. And in doing so, he gave a single mother the one thing she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And slowly, as the plane moved through the clouds, the heaviness in her chest began to lift. Not completely, but enough to remind her she wasn't alone. The plane moved smoothly through the clouds, and most passengers had settled into their quiet routines. Some were asleep, their heads resting on small pillows. Others watched movies with headphones on. A few chatted softly, their voices like whispers in the air. But for the woman holding her child, the world had changed. She was still sitting in the same seat, still wearing the same tired clothes, still feeling the same pain in her body. But something inside her heart had shifted. The small gift from the flight attendant, sent by the man a few rows ahead, had done more than offer comfort. It had reminded her that kindness still existed, and that maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. The blanket was now wrapped gently around her sleeping child, who looked peaceful for the first time in hours. The tiny toy sat in the child's lap. It was a small plastic animal, nothing expensive, but it had brought a smile. A real, happy smile. The mother had quietly wiped her tears and whispered, "Thank you again," even though she knew the man couldn't hear her. Keanu Reeves didn't look back. He didn't make a big deal about anything. But that was the most beautiful part of it. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't doing it for attention. He was just being himself, quiet, thoughtful, kind. As the plane flew on, something else began to happen. Other passengers started noticing. A woman in the row behind the mother leaned forward slightly and asked, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" The mother smiled, surprised. "I'm fine now, thank you." Another man across the aisle, who had been ignoring her earlier, now gave her a warm nod. "Your little one's very sweet," he said. She nodded politely, still not sure how to react. Then a young girl sitting with her father stood up and walked over with a coloring book. She smiled shyly and handed it to the mother's child. "You can have this," she said. "I'm done with it." The mother was touched. Her voice was soft as she whispered, "Thank you, that's very kind." More and more, the people around her began to show quiet kindness. Nothing loud or over the top, just small warm actions. A napkin handed to her when she needed to wipe her child's mouth. A bottle of water from a fellow passenger. Even just a kind look, a smile that said, "We see you." It was like something invisible had spread through the cabin. One small act of quiet help had broken the wall that kept everyone apart. People who had once been strangers now felt a little more connected. And through it all, Keanu Reeves stayed calm and quiet in his seat. At one point, the child began to fidget again, as children do on long flights. They wanted to walk, move, explore. The mother looked tired again, clearly unsure what to do next. Before she could even stand up, A flight attendant approached and offered her a better seat with more space, a small row at the back that was currently empty. She hesitated. Really? The flight attendant smiled. Yes, someone asked me to make sure you were comfortable. She knew who that someone was. With gentle hands, she picked up her child, her bag, and the blanket. As she moved toward the new seat, she walked past Keanu. He was reading now, his face calm and focused. She stopped for a moment beside him. Their eyes met. She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at him, trying to find the right words. He gave her a soft smile, the kind that doesn't need words at all. Finally she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded, still smiling. Then, he did something that would stay with her forever. He held his hand over his heart, then gently lowered it. It was like saying, "You're welcome. Stay strong." No speeches, no crowd watching. Just one human being helping another in silence. As she sat in her new seat with more space, she felt something inside her that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Lightness. For months she had carried so much on her shoulders. Worry, shame, fear, pain. And now, even if just for a few hours, that weight didn't feel so heavy. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Her child played quietly beside her with the toy and coloring book. The hum of the airplane felt softer now, almost peaceful. The people around her were no longer strangers. The cabin felt warmer, even though the temperature hadn't changed. And all of this, every little thing started with one silent act of kindness. She didn't need a miracle. She didn't expect to be rescued. All she wanted was to be seen, to not feel invisible. And in that small space, flying high above the clouds, that wish had come true. Sometimes, the world doesn't need big heroes in capes. It needs quiet ones, the kind who give without asking, the kind who notice without judging, the kind who make others feel human again. And on that flight, Keanu Reeves was that kind of hero. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. The plane was still in the air, moving gently through the sky, but something about the mood had changed. It was quieter, warmer, almost like everyone on board had become part of something special without even planning it. People weren't just strangers anymore. They had shared something real, even if it was small. The mother now sat in her new seat near the back of the plane, where there was more room. Her child was lying across the extra space, softly playing with the toy they had received. The mother looked more relaxed than before. Her shoulders weren't so tight. Her face wasn't so pale. There was a light in her eyes now, a small spark of peace that hadn't been there when she first boarded the plane. But even as she rested, her mind was full. She kept thinking about the man a few rows ahead, Keanu Reeves. She couldn't stop wondering why he had helped her, even though she hadn't asked. He didn't know her. He had no reason to care. And yet, he had. She thought back to the moment their eyes met. It was such a simple thing, but it had meant everything. For the first time in a long time, someone had looked at her, not through her, not past her, but right at her and saw a person. Not a problem, not a burden. Just a woman doing her best. That kind of kindness stays with a person. And Keanu hadn't just helped her with words or gifts. He had started something bigger. Because once he showed kindness, others followed. That was what amazed her most. People who had ignored her before were now watching her child with gentle smiles. A man had offered to carry her bag down the aisle earlier. A woman across from her had offered gum and even shared a joke. All of it had begun with one quiet action. Meanwhile, Keanu remained in his seat, calm and still, not saying much. He didn't need to. The flight attendants kept checking on the mother and child now, more often than before. One even brought her an extra sandwich when meal service came around. She didn't ask for it. They just handed it to her and said, "You need this more than I do." The mother had to blink quickly to stop the tears from falling again. It wasn't about the sandwich, it was about being remembered, being cared. 4. And now she realized something important: people do want to help. Sometimes they just need someone to show them how. And that's exactly what Keanu had done. Without saying a word, he had reminded everyone that kindness is still alive. At one point during the flight, the child looked up and whispered, "Mommy, are we safe now?" The mother nodded slowly, her voice calm and sure. "Yes, baby, we're safe." She didn't know what the future would hold. She still didn't have a job waiting for her at the other end. She still didn't know if her cousin would really welcome them. But she had something now that she hadn't had before: hope. And a little hope can carry a person a long way. She looked down at her child, gently brushing the hair away from their face, and smiled. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, "one step at a time." A few minutes later, something else unexpected happened. One of the flight attendants leaned down again and said quietly, "Mr. Reeves would like to offer you his phone number, in case you ever need anything." The mother was stunned. "He said only if you feel comfortable," the attendant added. The mother held the small slip of paper in her hands. It was simple, just a number, no name, no message. But she knew what it meant. He wasn't offering fame or favors. He wasn't asking for thanks. It was just his way of saying, if life gets too hard again, you're not alone. She didn't know if she would ever call it. Maybe she never would. But just knowing she had it made her feel 10 times stronger. The child, unaware of all the adult emotions in the air, pointed toward the window. "Look, Mommy, clouds." She smiled and nodded. "Yes, baby." Beautiful clouds. Outside the window, the sky stretched wide, soft and golden from the afternoon sun. The clouds looked like mountains of light floating in the air. The mother rested her head back and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of how far she had come, how she had almost lost all hope, and how one kind stranger helped her believe in people again. No spotlight, no headlines, just a quiet act of love in a world that often forgets to care. And that was the moment when the passengers, one by one, began to understand. They had watched it happen. They had felt it, even if they didn't speak about it out loud. And some of them, those with hearts wide enough to feel deeply, couldn't hold back their own tears anymore. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes silently. A man behind Keanu took off his glasses and looked out the window, his lips pressed tightly to hide emotion. They weren't crying because of sadness. They were crying because in a world full of noise and distraction, they had just witnessed something pure, real kindness. And it had touched something inside them they didn't know was still there. The flight was slowly coming to its final hours. The sky outside had started to change color, moving from soft gold to a gentle orange. As the sun began to set, the cabin lights stayed dim, and a peaceful silence settled over the plane. Most people were quiet now, either resting or thinking. But inside the mother's heart, something beautiful was happening. She looked at the slip of paper in her hand. Again, the phone number Keanu had sent her was small, written in clean, simple handwriting. It didn't say much, but it said everything. It told her she mattered. It told her that someone had noticed her when she was breaking inside. That someone, without making a big deal, had stepped in to remind her she wasn't alone in the world. She folded the paper carefully and put it in a small side pocket of her bag. She didn't know if she'd ever use it, but that wasn't the point. Just having it gave her strength. It was like holding a rope when you're climbing out of the dark. You may not need to pull it now, but it's there. And that makes all the difference. Her child was now fast asleep again, this time curled up in the warm blanket, holding the little toy like it was the most precious thing in the world. The coloring book lay nearby, filled with half-finished pictures. The mother smiled, a tired smile, but real. The kind that grows when pain finally makes room for peace. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. She thought about everything that had happened on this flight. She remembered the way she almost broke down, the silence she tried to hide behind, The moment when she had tried to speak to Keanu and failed. And then, how everything had slowly changed after that. All because someone saw her, noticed her pain, and didn't turn away. That small moment had opened the hearts of others too. The kindness had spread like soft music in a quiet room. It had touched people without words, and it reminded them that they were human too, that they could care, that they could feel. That kindness still lived, even in a world that sometimes felt too cold. Passengers around her had begun to talk more gently. One woman had asked her if she needed help getting off the plane once it landed. Another gave her a card with the name of a local support group in the city she was going to. A man had quietly handed her a pack of gum with a smile, saying, "For the little one when the pressure hits during landing." Small things, but every one of them mattered. She began to realize something important. This wasn't just about her anymore. This flight had become something more. It had become a story. A reminder. A message that people are good, that help can come quietly, and that sometimes one small act of kindness can wake up the kindness in everyone else around it. And sitting just a few rows ahead was the man who had started it all, without even trying to be a hero. Keanu Reeves was still there, quiet, calm, reading a book now. Every once in a while, he'd look up and glance around. He didn't seem proud or special. He didn't act like someone who had changed a woman's entire day. He just looked peaceful, but inside that peaceful man was a heart that had chosen to care, and that care had created a wave that others had followed. The mother looked at him and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: respect. Not the kind people give just because someone is famous. This was different. She respected him as a man, as a human, as someone who used his quiet presence to do something truly powerful. He had reminded her what it felt like to be seen. And now she would never forget it. Suddenly, the plane hit a small bit of turbulence. It wasn't serious, just a quick bump. The mother placed a firm hand over her child, holding them gently. The child didn't wake, still sleeping soundly. She looked down at their face and smiled again. A few seats away, someone gasped softly at the turbulence, gripping their seat. Another person laughed nervously. But the mother didn't feel afraid. She felt strong now. She had faced far worse than a shaky plane, and she had made it this far. Now she believed she could make it the rest of the way. She looked out the window. Beside her, the clouds looked like fire, glowing orange and pink under the setting sun. The sky was endless, beautiful and open. And she thought to herself, "I'm still flying, I'm still going. I haven't given up." Not because someone saved her, but because someone reminded her she could save herself. Because someone reminded her that she was worth helping, and that changed everything. She leaned back in her seat and rested her hand over her child's chest, feeling the slow rise and fall with each breath. It was a soft rhythm that kept her grounded, reminding her of what mattered most. And in her heart, she quietly said thank you, not just to Keanu Reeves, but to every kind person on that flight. To every soul who saw her, helped her, and didn't ask for anything in return. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in life are the quiet ones, and this quiet flight had become one of the loudest lessons in her heart. A lesson in love, in hope, in humanity. The flight was finally starting to descend. A soft voice came through the speakers, announcing that the plane would land in about 20 minutes. Seatbelts clicked. Chairs straightened. Passengers began to wake up, stretch, and prepare for arrival. But in the back of the plane, the mother sat quietly, her eyes still looking out at the fading orange sky. She didn't feel the same as she had when the flight began. When she boarded, she was broken, tired, lost. She had no plan except to survive. Her heart had been heavy, her face full of tears, and her mind full of fear. But now something had changed. She looked down at her child, still sleeping, mouth slightly open, cheeks rosy from the nap. The small toy lay tucked in beside the little one, and the soft blanket was pulled up to the chin. The sight made the mother's lips curve into a gentle smile. She reached down and brushed a lock of hair away from the child's forehead. She had made it. The flight was almost over, and she had made it through without falling apart. But she didn't do it alone, she remembered. Every moment. The quiet pain she had tried to hide. The way no one looked at her at first. And then, the man who had noticed her tears. Who gave her help without asking for thanks. Who reminded her, just by being kind, that she still mattered. Keanu Reeves. She had known his name for years, of course. He was famous, a star, but to her, now he was something more. He was a stranger who had shown her humanity when she needed it most. He had done things in silence, never trying to be the center of attention, never acting like a celebrity. Just a man with a good heart who saw someone in pain and chose to act. And because of him, others had followed. It was like lighting a candle in a dark room. One light made others shine too. The mother glanced around the cabin. People were smiling. A few looked over at her with soft eyes. She nodded politely, her heart full of quiet thanks. She didn't need to say anything. They all understood. They had all been part of it. Then the plane dipped slightly, beginning the slow journey down to the runway. Her child stirred awake, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Are we there yet?" The child whispered. "Almost," the mother replied softly, kissing the child's head. The little one yawned and looked out the window, then rested against her shoulder again. The mother reached for her bag and checked the pocket, where she had placed the slip of paper, the one with Keanu's phone number. It was still there, safe. She held it for a moment, feeling its weight. It was just paper and ink, but it felt like something powerful. A lifeline, a gift, a reminder that even in the darkest moment, someone cared. She placed it back carefully and zipped the pocket shut. As the wheels touched down, there was a soft cheer in the cabin. Some people clapped, a habit on long flights. The mother smiled, joining in with gentle applause. Not just for the landing, but for everything. The plane slowly rolled toward the gate. The seatbelt light stayed on, and the voice on the speaker thanked everyone for flying. Keanu Reeves stood up quietly, stretching a little. He reached into the overhead bin and took out a simple bag, no expensive brand. Just a plain black travel bag. He looked back once, his eyes meeting the mother's again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She smiled, and he smiled back. There was nothing more to say, no words needed. Everything had already been said through actions, through kindness, through silent understanding. When it was time to exit, passengers moved slowly down the aisle. The mother stayed back, waiting with her child until the crowd thinned. A few people gave her soft smiles and nods as they passed. "You're a strong mom," one woman said kindly. "Thank you," the mother replied, her voice gentle but steady. At last it was their turn to walk down the narrow aisle. Her child held her hand tightly, still sleepy but excited. The mother carried the bag on one shoulder, the blanket folded under her arm. As they stepped out of the plane and into the airport, everything felt new. The air smelled different. The lights were brighter. The world seemed just a little more kind. She didn't know what would happen next. She still didn't have a job. She still had to find her cousin. There would still be hard days ahead. But something had changed inside her. She believed in herself again. She believed in people again. And that made her feel powerful in a quiet, unshakable way. Outside the gate, Keanu was already walking toward the exit. A few people noticed him and whispered, but he didn't stop. He gave a quick wave to a staff member, nodded to someone holding a camera, and kept walking. Before he disappeared around the corner, he looked back once, just once, and the mother saw him. She raised her hand slightly. In a wave, not big, just enough to say, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for helping me," without a single word, and then he was gone. But the memory WS and single quotes did that, it stayed with her. It always would, because that flight wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was about a journey she didn't expect. Journey of kindness, of hope, of strength she forgot she had. And it started with a simple act from a quiet man who believed in doing good, even when no one was watching. The airport was crowded, filled with voices, rolling suitcases, and the steady sound of footsteps. People hurried to their gates, hugged loved ones, or waited in long lines. But for the single mother and her child, the world moved a little slower. Every step they took felt different now. Lighter, calmer, even peaceful. They had made it. As they walked through the airport holding hands, the mother kept looking around, taking it all in. The bright lights above, the voices over the speakers, the sound of laughter from people reuniting, it all felt like a dream. Just a few hours ago, she had felt completely broken. Now she didn't feel broken anymore. She felt strong. Her child skipped ahead a little, still holding the toy from the plane. That toy had become something special. It wasn't just plastic, it was proof that someone cared. And not just anyone. A man the whole world knew. A man who didn't just act in movies but acted with heart when it truly mattered. Keanu Reeves hadn't made a big speech. He hadn't rushed in like a hero in a movie. He had done something more rare, more real. He had cared quietly. He had helped in a way that let her keep her dignity. A way that let her feel human again. The mother found a bench near the exit and sat down to rest. Her child climbed beside her, swinging small feet above the floor. They were both tired, but it was a good kind of tired. She opened her bag and checked the paper again. It was still there, folded carefully in the same pocket. She smiled, tracing the edge of it with her finger. Not because she planned to call, but because it reminded her of something powerful she had been seeing. And sometimes, that's all someone needs. To be seen. To be heard. To be treated like they matter. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting everything sink in. The tears she had cried on the plane. The fear she had felt when no one noticed her. The warmth she felt when Keanu Reeves did. Now she understood why people said he was different. It wasn't just because he was famous. It was because he chose kindness when it would have been easy to stay silent. Because he noticed what others ignored. And because he gave without expecting anything back. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message. It was from her cousin. "Hey, I just parked outside. Let me know when you're ready. I'm here to pick you both up." She smiled. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a burden asking for help. She didn't feel like someone running from failure. She felt like someone starting again, with courage. With hope. "Come on, sweetie," she said, standing up and taking her child's hand again. They walked slowly toward the exit. Outside the airport, the air was cooler. Cars lined the pickup zone. Her cousin stood near a small car waving. The cousin gave her a tight hug and smiled at the child. "You look tired," the cousin said. The mother nodded. "I am," she said honestly, "but I'm okay." The cousin helped with the bag and they got in the car. As the vehicle pulled away from the airport, the mother looked out the window one more time. She didn't see Keanu Reeves again. He had disappeared into the city, back to his life. But his kindness had followed her. Not in the form of money or fame, but in the quiet way he had reminded her of her own strength. The rest of the ride was quiet. Her cousin asked simple questions. How the flight went, if the child had been good, if she needed anything to eat. The mother answered softly. Every word she spoke now came from a heart that felt alive again. That night, as they reached the cousin's small apartment, she looked around. At the new space. It was nothing fancy. Just a pull-out bed, a few chairs, some kids' toys in a corner. But to her, it felt like a palace. She helped her child wash up and tuck them into bed. The toy from the plane lay beside the pillow. Her child yawned and whispered, "Mommy, that man on the plane was like a real angel." The mothers smiled and kissed their forehead. "Yes," she said, "he really was." After her child fell asleep, the mother sat alone in the quiet room. The city lights blinked. Through the small window, she reached into her bag one last time and pulled out the slip of paper. She looked at the number again. Maybe. She'd never call it, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that it had been offered. What mattered was that someone had shown her compassion. What mattered was that it had changed her. And she knew, deep inside, that no matter how hard life would get from now on, she would carry this memory with her like armor. Kindness is a quiet power. In that day, on a plane high above the world, she had been wrapped in it, without noise, without show, without asking. And so were many others watching. People would go home and tell the story to friends. Some would say, "You won't believe what Keanu Reeves did on our flight." But for the mother, it would never be just a celebrity story. It was a moment that saved her. A moment that healed something inside her heart. And for the rest of her life, she would remember, sometimes one quiet act of kindness can change everything.